This is the Asus MG278Q gaming monitor. It's a 27-inch monitor with a resolution of 2560 by 1440 and it has a 144Hz refresh rate. It uses a TN panel and has a response time of 1 millisecond. And it also comes equipped with AMD FreeSync technology, so if you have a compatible AMD card, you'll get tear and stutter-free gaming, at least in theory. I set out over the last 2 weeks to find out whether it's any good and whether it's worth your cash. What's up guys, and welcome to this video. So then, the MG278Q, is it any good? Well, it's very easy to assemble, we'll start there. It doesn't require any tools. It will help if you have a screwdriver to hand, but realistically you can do it tool free without problem. And once you've got it on your desk, you'll start to realise that the overall design is very nice. It sort of has almost like sharp edges without actually having sharp edges, and the overall design is nicely in the middle between like a cool out there gaming design and then something maybe a bit more industrious that wouldn't look out of place in an office. And overall the design, I have to say, is very good. Asus definitely have a thing for this, and in this particular monitor that is no different. On the front of the monitor you'll see that we've got a nice matte plastic effect that doesn't look cheap, but it's not some horrible metal substitute either. It's plastic, you know it's plastic, but it does look very good. Bezels are very thin. They're not as thin as you will find on some other monitors, but overall I don't think anyone really will have too much of an issue. And yes, the overall design from the front is very nice, but if you want to operate the buttons, you'll see on the front that you've got some icons, but the buttons themselves are on the back. And on the back you'll find some pretty obvious buttons on the right hand side, and because they're physical buttons, they're very easy to use. The menu system as well, I have to say, is very easy to use, and one of the most well laid out menu systems that I've used in recent months. It's good to have physical buttons, but because they are on the back of the monitor, even though you've got little icons on the front that tells you what they do, it does take a while to sort of learn what all the different functions do. And you've got this thing called Game Plus that you can turn on, which is essentially a crosshair, or you can have a FPS counter and things like that on screen that actually do have some real world applications if you want to start using adaptive FreeSync technology, because it shows you what your refresh rate is, but for most people you probably won't use it. But once you've set up the monitor the way you want it to, everything is pretty much where you need it to be, and you probably won't need to go into the menu systems again. To get this thing plugged in though, of course you're going to need to use one of the inputs, and there are inputs aplenty because this is a FreeSync monitor rather than one of those early G-Sync ones that only had one display port. And on this particular monitor we've got one display port, one HDMI 2.0, one HDMI 1.4, as well as a DVI, but the DVI is more of a legacy connection here, and I'd suggest using the DisplayPort, or if you really have to, probably the HDMI 2.0. If you want to use the USB, then you have one upstream and two downstream. These are USB 3, and you can also quick charge your device with these ports as well. So it's pretty well connected and pretty much should have everyone covered. Once you have this thing on your desk though, it's very easy to adjust as well. The stand itself is very sturdy, and you've got pivot, so you can pivot it to 90 degrees if you really want, as well as having tilt and full swivel. So you can pretty much get it adjusted no matter how you want to do that. And if you want to use this in a multi-monitor configuration, you should find all these functionality pretty useful. Viewing angles as well are very good for a TN panel, both in the horizontal and the vertical plane. It's not going to be as good as something like a VA or more particularly an IPS panel, but I have to say for a TN panel I was pretty impressed. And the same goes for the overall image quality. Yes, it is a TN panel. The benefits of a TN panel is that you get a lower refresh rate, lower response time of 1 milliseconds, whereas something like an IPS panel you're looking at least 4. So if you do want to be doing some really fast-paced gaming, that's going to benefit you, but the downside is that your colours will never really pop, and while the colours are definitely very, very good for a TN panel, they still aren't going to match a decent VA or IPS panel. So professional users, you probably will want to look elsewhere. But for the general user that just generally uses his PC, and of course for the gamer, then actually I would say it's definitely more than acceptable, and some people will actually be quite impressed if they've only sort of ever used the more cheaper TN panels in the past. Overall, on image quality, pretty impressed, as long as you are aware that it is a TN panel. But you already knew that already, right? What you're interested in is the gaming aspects. And yes, this is a 144Hz 1440p panel with FreeSync, and that is a brilliant combination. It has a FreeSync operational range of between 40 and 144 Hz. So as long as you keep it in that range, you're going to have a experience with significantly reduced stutter and tearing. And I can't really say I recall seeing any tearing throughout my use of this monitor. Unfortunately, stutter, I have seen some, but that is expected. I mean, you've got to be realistic. If the monitor drops by 30 frames a second, even though the monitor is catching up with the graphics card, you're still going to notice that. Your eye notices a 30 frames a second drop. And it's not even just your eyes, it's the feeling of the game. You can feel that the game has stuttered. But as long as you play a game that's well optimized and maybe drops between 10-15 frames a second at worst, and as long as it's a sort of smooth curve, you're not going to notice any stutter at all, which is where FreeSync and G-Sync both come into their own. I would say that the overall experience still isn't quite as good as it is with a G-Sync monitor, but it's significantly cheaper, and for that reason I personally think FreeSync has the legs, whereas G-Sync at the moment is looking slightly endangered. I mean, why would you want to pay all this extra money for a G-Sync monitor unless it was significantly better? And at present they're better, but they're not significantly better, and I can only see FreeSync closing up the gap. So it's going to be interesting to watch this space. But if you do want to play games, whether you're a AMD or Nvidia user, the monitor really is a pleasure to use, because that 144Hz refresh rate, as long as you have a graphics card that can drive that, means that your gaming can be really nice and smooth, even if you don't have FreeSync or G-Sync, because it's not on this monitor enabled. My experience with Call of Duty Black Ops 3 was probably unparalleled, and I haven't had a better experience on any other monitor. Playing on a TN monitor does have some advantages, and while the IPS really high refresh rate monitors are catching up, and some people won't notice a difference, if you play some really fast-paced Twitch-based games, so this is games that are on Twitch, these are Twitch reactions games, then TN panels still have the best experience. It's just the colour reproduction and viewing angles aren't quite as good as they would be on an IPS panel. But overall, very impressive, and I have really enjoyed playing games on this monitor. And so with that, it's conclusion time. This is a cracking TN monitor, and as long as you're aware that the colours won't necessarily be as good on some of these more expensive gaming monitors now that are using IPS panels, I think you're going to be very impressed indeed. And if you do play some fast Twitch-based games, then you're going to have a brilliant experience. The resolution as well of 1440p is the sweet spot for gamers or just general users alike, unless you're going to be doing some serious image editing or you have a serious amount of horsepower. A 4K monitor is just going to cause you hassle because you have all those extra pixels to drive and you probably don't have the power to do it. But there is one big problem with this monitor, and it's not with the monitor itself, it's its IPS cousin that costs about £50 more. You can find the full number of this below. I believe it's the MG279PQ, but that could be wrong. Find the full model number here. And for an extra £50, I think it makes more sense for people to go down the IPS route. That's not to say that monitor's perfect, because it's not, and you will have a reduced FreeSync range, whereas this one goes all the way up to 144Hz. But for an extra £50, I think people are probably better off looking at an IPS monitor, at least before making their decision. But if you are someone that really only plays Twitch-based games, then this is probably the best gaming experience you're going to get. Or if you're someone that just wants to save the extra £50, then this is a solid choice, and that's why it wins the Top Performer award. So, thank you so much for checking out this video as always, I really appreciate it. Slightly changed the format, so let me know what you thought and whether you think the opening sequence should stay or should go. I'm hoping that the overall quality is better as a result. If you like this video though, please give it a like, because it lets other people know that it's a video worth watching and people will watch it. Likewise, if it's rubbish and people shouldn't watch it, hit that dislike button to let people know that they shouldn't watch it. But either way, subscribe for more videos like this, as well as some other cool things coming very, very soon. If you have any questions though, leave a comment below or at PCcentric on Twitter, and that's probably the best place because I can get back to you as quickly as possible. So thank you so much for checking out this video, as always, and I'll see you in the next one.